AudiobookHubs that provoke. This book is trying to air some of my views, perhaps uncommon and controversial, about a few issues that we constantly grapple with. All my observations may not be fully and unquestionably right, nor will they be a farce, and completely devoid of merit. Written by Roy T. James. Part 8. Chapter 43. How to know what is life. Why is that we are not as clear about life as about lifeless things? Is it that we haven't tried enough? Or is there a limit to knowledge? Can we learn everything about everything? Can we know what is life? What is the reigning thought? We know many things. We also hold a few things as beyond the mind, thus beyond understanding. Mind, on its part, is conceived as an entity having limitations, which itself subject to great variation, posing another hurdle. All infinite and never-ending things are considered to be beyond the mind, and we attribute to everything something infinite and never-ending. In short, it is far easier to be without any idea of something than to be aware of it. The difficulty in comprehending things is accepted as something associated with life. In all probability, this could be the truth. The idea of space. Space is everywhere, both inside and outside of everything. The presence thus has to be acknowledged of an infinite number of universes inside every atom in the universe. If a piece of a material is cut it in half and cut the half in half and so on, it can go on. In this case, one will never run out of something to cut. When you burn something, you are just turning the material into heat, light, ash, and smoke, etc. Also, nothing is lost in this reaction. Even the electric power that runs TV or computer is not lost. One can look at electric power as water flowing through the cord into the screen. This then sprays out into the room and back into the environment again. Nothing can be considered as lost. All that takes place is just a change in form. Everything moves in a circle or cycle, back and forth. This, in a nutshell, can be considered as our present idea about material things. In a similar manner, by using the certain process of elimination, extrapolation, or any other method of reasoning, we think we can learn about life. Is that correct? Is unfolding the inner secrets of life just a matter of time? I think we are going on a tangent. That too motivated by our predilection with the material dimension of life. For a better idea about our appreciation of life, think of a group of frogs residing in a well, and another group living outside. The cosmology of those inside may contain ideas of the universe, as well as a certain variety of species, both limited in its extent. For example, they will be having strong notions of cosmic background noise, as they will be hearing a lot of noise during their lifetime without actually seeing where the sound comes from. If the owner of the well follows a pattern of cleaning the well on a yearly basis as most villagers do, those frogs may also possess certain ancestral knowledge about the end of the universe. Assuming that some frog, in the past, happened to escape back into the well and witness the cleaning process. Now think of the other group. These frogs will be having a totally different cosmology with better grasp about things and will be free of illusions like cosmic background noise. Questions like the end of the universe may not occur at all of them, having never experienced a discontinuity. How does this story fit in for humans? On all matters except those concerning life, we are like the latter group, assuming that reality exists, whether we perceive it or not, and there is no logical necessity for an end, whichever facet of the universe is under consideration. But when it comes to life, I think we are severely handicapped. Like the earlier group of frogs, our idea of life is only what we experience from inside life. Unless we are able to view life from a plane different from life, all the notions we entertain about life cannot describe life in full. Nobody can say I understand what a globe is unless one has a look at it, that too, from the outside of it. Here, our fondness for the spiritual dimension of life is effectively putting a brake in our quest for new ideas. Chapter 44. What is the future of politics? What will happen to politics? Think of our world. A few years back, the whole humanity can be thought of as consisting of two types of people. One, who had the capability to produce things thanks to an innovative approach, and two, the many, who needed to buy such products for their convenience. The many, the ultimate users, had to be made aware of what the producer made, and how desirable is it for one's life. Thereafter, Making the product available for the many to buy was a challenge, more so since transportation was not easy. Those who were involved in the business of familiarization and supply of goods happened to become the best-known names in our society, and the ones employed there, most sought-after friends. Think of our world now. Now we have many who take up production, and many who are ultimate users, but hardly few are there involved with familiarization and supply of goods and services. The reason is very clear. Both transportation and communication has become fairly simple tasks. If there are any who still cling on to the old tasks of familiarization or supply of goods, they are looked down upon by our society as someone who profiteers, called commission agents. If things are in short supply, or if they are priced high, those following such professions stand to bear the brunt. Something similar is awaiting politicians. In yesterday's world, people were neither educated enough nor well informed about their rights and duties as a member of society. In fact, they were not fully aware of their role in society. Politicians came to fill the gap and acted as a bridge between the citizenry, which was fairly ignorant, and the arms of government, and that was a necessity. But in today's world, things are different. People are educated enough and well informed about their rights and duties. There is no discernible gap between those governed in different arms of government, thanks to better communication, transportation, and also the populace being well read. Politicians, hence, have no role to play. They are on their way to becoming unnecessary. Signs of change. Politician bashing is a common sight of these days. Whether in West or East, irrespective of presidential, military or democratic dispensation, no country is free of this entertainment. Nowhere else can this be seen more clearly than in the violent and widespread objections to the continuation of a few privileges politicians, traditionally, used to enjoy. I think it is a result of this. Politicians, in general, are losing their sheen, and they find the citizens not cooperating enough or disinterested with such an important task as governance. Consequently, they may find the need to introduce new things to their society to make the populace deserving of a good, trouble-free life. A proposal which is in the air, one aimed at making voting an essential duty of all citizens, and more or less mandatory, should be seen in this light. There are signs that a significant number of citizens do not feel that their concerns are being addressed by the mainstream parties or the political system. There are two main reasons for this. 1. From the citizens' side, they confuse government with politicians, which is because the politicians are the ones most easily identifiable with governance. And 2. From the politicians' side, they take the rather lighter responsibility of delivering governance, rather than thinking about governance in the abstract, their rightful job. This is because, unlike the past, the best of the generation do not opt for politics as a natural destination. What should happen to politics? At present, political dissatisfaction is on the rise amongst members of the majority of people, the white working classes in some countries and the middle class in some other. This dissatisfaction, incidentally, manifests in many other forms having religious, societal, economic, or military dimensions. An immediate offshoot of this disengagement of a considerable part of the populace from playing their role as citizens further accentuates it. We need to recognize the role that the well-to-do, educated and empowered working majority, mostly white-collared, should be expected to play. Lower participation in formal democratic processes may not mean disengagement from all forms of politics. On the contrary, it should be seen as a warning to alter the political processes appropriately to enable the participation of the majority. There could be many methods to see that such a thing happens, rather than forcing a huge populace to tune themselves to certain archaic systems and procedures. This, of course, might entail a shift in our basic approach to governance. For example, many new opportunities exist to collate wants, opinions, or desires of a large population, if the capability of information technology is made to work for us. Also, appropriation of resources or fetching other forms of wealth becomes child's play, that too, with hardly any possibilities of dissatisfaction or mistake, if the phenomenal computing power made available by the digital revolution is put to use. Even the introduction of a new type of governance, real-time democracy, is possible if all citizens are connected to a central server directing the various elements of government, which is programmed to act on the input from citizens thus connected, appropriately. Computer programs, in this case, shall be taking over the role of politicians who in turn can be making a graceful exit. Just as we saw earlier, how the growth of communication made the profession of commission agents redundant, the strides in IT have the potential to make whatever is left of politicians fade away. In the interim, quite sharp and rather unpredictable reactions can be expected from all politicians, even to events that are not very noteworthy, and some of these, mostly from those who presently are in positions of power, would be of grave consequences. These are but the gasps of a dying profession. It is quite probable that this will lead to a large-scale restructuring of our society, whereby more people will be busy in productive ventures, and less in activities of controlling nature. This can leave one with the happy thought that much brighter tomorrows shall then await tomorrow. Chapter 45: What will be the future of humans? It's hard to stay away from making some predictions of our future. To begin with, have an overview of the state of the art, as far as predictions go. To appreciate better, all of those can be grouped into certain general categories, each impressive in its own right, as shown below. Prediction 1: Human evolution is dead because we have evolved. It may be natural to imagine we will continue to do so, but I think that's wrong. Anthropologists like Ian Tattersall of New York's American Museum of Natural History mentions Prediction 2: Humans will continue to evolve. Some scientists see plenty of evidence that human evolution is far from over. For instance, a study published last month in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences suggested that women of the future could become shorter and stouter. A team led by Yale University evolutionary biologist Stephen Stearns found that, due to ovulatory characteristics, shorter, slightly plumper women tend to have more children than their peers. These physical traits are passed on to their offspring, suggesting natural selection in humans who's alive and well. Prediction 3: Humans to achieve electronic immortality. A philosophy known as transhumanism sees humans taking charge of their evolution and transcending their biological limitations via technology. In essence, the old-fashioned devolution of the origin of species may be beside the point. The future may belong to unnatural selection. Future of Humanity Institute at the University of Oxford being one of the pioneers of this thought. Prediction 4: New era of evolution awaits on off-world colonies. If in the far distant future, habitable planets beyond our solar system were colonized by Earth migrants, that could provide the necessary isolation for new human species to evolve. Prediction 5: Dangerous climate change. What the future brings for the Earth and humans in regard to climate will be a catastrophe and environmental destruction. My prediction: ours is a dynamic world. Predictions about our future should necessarily reflect the dynamics of human society, an important constituent of future. What input can be more obvious for such a study than the present trends in the growth of our population? If we are to examine the world population data, where the rate of increase in the population of various nations for the last few decades is scrutinized, one thing comes to light: societies, which are still tied to the traditional concepts of the male superiority of the Middle Ages as far as the organization of the society is concerned, and are not very particular about male-female equality, show considerable population growth. Interestingly, it can be clearly seen that more traditional the society, more alarming the growth. Whereas, those societies in which modern, scientific thinking with gender equality prevail, population growth shows remarkable moderation in its rate. More equal the societies, more negative the growth. That gives rise to an important point to ponder. Today, among the different cultures or societies of the world, the repressive views, especially those pertaining to male-female equality and suppression of female sexuality, do face wide, effective opposition only because the moderates are in a decent, reckonable number. Won't in future, with the differential rate of population growth when moderates become a minority, the regressive majority will find themselves empowered enough to take whatever steps necessary to cement the existing gender inequalities, if not furthering them. Can't this be considered as the future in store for mankind, which essentially is anything but predictable? Chapter 46. What is the future of democracy? What will happen to democracy? How did democracy enter our lives? Democracy seems to me an antithesis of history. For neither there is a species without an identifiable social hierarchy, nor the human species has a period in its early origins without some form of hereditary leadership. Also, of all the forms of governance including anarchy, democracy is the one where the citizens are required to labour the most to have them governed. Still, it is the most preferred form of government. Therefore, how democracy happened to become a part of human society, in fact, is the first question that comes to me. Why did people gladly choose this form of governance? How did it begin? People of the same feather flocked together. The earlier days of our society would have been great. The vast treasure of ancient literature pointing to unparalleled intellectual wealth. To note one thing we can deduce from the signs left by bygone eras. Humans would have been living a life in a manner best suited for their survival, which, unlike all other forms of life, is one of independent existence. Look at the survival techniques of well-trained forces. Almost all of them pivot around self-contained, individual moves. It is possible that a few disgruntled elements joined together and formed a minuscule group. As it happens when humans group, then also, random ideas would have been evolving. And some of those ideas would have been to do something to harm the flourishing society. Just like we find these days in all our endeavours, it looks like a few of them joined together and gave that idea a rather formal look, calling it a party. This surprising discovery turned out to be an ideal concept, useful equally well for those who agree with the concept as well as who oppose vehemently. And since the institution of this, our society has never been the same. Party, the rationale for democracy. I think democracy then came to be instituted as a formal cover for making permanent rooms for such parties in our midst. We thus came to acquire party democracy, with all its incongruities and undesirables. I suppose the fact that there are many unsuitable elements in it has always been known to mankind. For improvements are being contemplated for the existing political system of governance in all democratic countries. Otherwise, what is the need to devote a lion's share of governmental efforts, not towards the activities of governance, but in trying to better governance? But this has been so since the earliest days I can remember. I have attended scores of political meetings, where allocating a greater amount of resources for improving the existing system governance was cited as the most urgent need facing the nation, to justify additional taxes and other ways of collecting resources. Nowadays also, this remains as a priority area for all governments. It seems either we have not been able to improve our system of governance or we failed in identifying the right cause for democracy's not being able to deliver the goods. I have been thinking about this, and I find that over the years we have come to adopt democracy as the most acceptable form of governance, but we seem to have forgotten the very rationale for democracy, that is, its role as an excuse for parties. This is quite surprising, when, even for a much insignificant idea, we do not feel comfortable unless its origins can be found out. At least as a topic of academic research, such a thing would have been in the probe. We are therefore not able to see the damage being done by parties or party politics in destroying the pristine character of democracy that we are interested in. The basic character of democracy, one that makes it true self-governance, is nothing but the free participation by all. By unceremoniously negating the primary condition which would have ensured rational decision-making at all levels, that all who participate will do so according to one's own free will, the party system has converted democracy to a maker of qualified decisions. Not only that, it has reduced the function of parties to one of always opposing the other side, a rather meaningless task. As a result of this, in cases where a decision does not produce the desired effect or lead to a failure, rather than re-examining the soundness of one's choice, a tough task, the ruling party feels the urge to take a readily available path, blame the opposition, easy alternative. I think many in our society will be agreeing with me. In spite of all this, we are continuing with the system of multi-party democracy, as it offers a convenience. The advantage of party politics is that governmental failures can be easily deflected away from the ruling party who can gloat in case of success, and the opposing party can very well share the glory of success while causing obstructions with impunity. Perhaps this advantage is what is preventing the populace from learning the undesirability of the party. I think there is writing on the wall. We can liberate democracy from party system, or we can let democracy give way to something else. Historically, unlike all other beings that happen to have some kind of leadership regulating all affairs of life, humans did pass through many mechanisms of organizing their society. Anarchy, oligarchy, and many other social experiments have preceded the present confusion, which, I think, is a transition period. We can make democracy free of party system by exploiting the capabilities of ID to have an abstract ruler listening to the views of each and every citizen. Such a system can work till a new development in science or elsewhere render the technology redundant. Chapter 47: How to Appropriate Democracy. In my essay, What is the Future of Democracy?, I proposed a shift in our approach to democracy to delay its deterioration to something unpredictable. True, the conclusion that democracy is on the move needs to be supported by evidence. How can we say democracy is changing? What signs are there to show any such thing? Why should democracy change? Democracy needs to change because there is a gap between how our representatives, the de facto practitioners of democracy, think and what its ultimate beneficiaries, the citizens, hope to achieve. The first indication of such a void and a sign that a change might be called for is the way our politicians, the part of democracy that is visible the most, appear in our daily affairs. Telltale signs. These days, it is a common sight to see politician bashing, whether in West or East, irrespective of presidential, military or democratic dispensation. No country is free of this entertainment. My aim is not to belittle politicians, but the way they treat each other, embolden all others also to do so. Nowhere else can this be seen more clearly than in the violent and widespread objections to the continuation of a few, somewhat nominal privileges the politicians used to enjoy. Maybe as a result of this, politicians, in general, find citizens either not cooperating enough or disinterested with such an important task as governance. Consequently, they may also find the populace undeserving of a good, trouble-free society. A proposal to make voting an essential duty of all citizens, and more or less mandatory, seems to be in the offing. There are signs that a significant number of citizens do not feel that their concerns are being addressed by the mainstream parties or the political system. There are two main reasons for this. 1. From the citizens' side, they confuse government with politicians, which is because the politicians are the ones who are more easily identifiable with governance. And 2. From the politicians' side, they take the rather lighter responsibility when it comes to delivering governance. Rather than thinking about governance in the abstract, their rightful job, they keep themselves busy in current issues even though those may be trivial. Result: governance does not keep with the times. This, I think, is their own doing. Unlike in the past, the best of the generation do not opt for politics as a natural destination. What can be done? This is giving rise to a layer of political dissatisfaction amongst members of the majority of people, the white working classes in some countries and the middle class in some other. An immediate reaction to this disengagement of a considerable part of the populace from playing their role as citizens further accentuates it. We need to recognize the role that the well-to-do, educated and empowered working majority, mostly white-collared, should be expected to play. Lower participation in formal democratic processes may not mean disengagement from all forms of politics. On the contrary, it should be seen as a warning to alter the political processes appropriately to enable the participation of the majority. There could be many methods to see that such a thing happens, rather than forcing a huge populace to tune themselves to certain archaic systems and procedures. This, of course, might entail a shift in our basic approach to governance. For example, many new opportunities exist to collate wants, opinions, or desires of a large population if the capability of information technology is put to use. Also, appropriation of resources or other forms of wealth becomes child's play, that too, with hardly any possibilities of dissatisfaction or mistake, in the face of the huge computing power made available by the digital revolution. Even the introduction of a new type of governance, real-time democracy, is possible if all citizens are connected to a central server directing the various elements of government, which is programmed to act on the input from citizens as connected, appropriately. Computer programs, in this case, shall be usurping the role of politicians who in turn can be making a graceful exit. Just as we saw earlier, how the growth of communication made the profession of commission agents redundant, the strides in IT have the potential to make whatever is left of politicians fade away. In the interim, quite sharp and rather unexpected reactions can be expected from all politicians, even to events that are not very noteworthy, and some of these, mostly from those who presently are in positions of power, would be of grave consequences. These are but the gasps of a dying profession. An immediate step. Whip, which we frequently use to control members of legislature, can be adapted suitably to act as a good first aid. Whip, in this context, is an effective survival tool for the democracy that is severely doped with party politics, a non-linearity introduced into the heart of the democratic processes of debates and discussions. In fact, in the absence of the whip, there is nothing to prevent the legislative house from thinking rationally. Healthy debates and enlightening discussions can always lead to the best scenario or option, this being the approach on all matters of great significance to the country's welfare. It is unfathomable why a democratic government should fail to meet expectations. The practice of democracy in the ancient world had been spotless. The vast treasure of Greek classics and the clean description of ancient governments show. But whip changes all that. It brings in a rather substantial change. By severely constricting expressions of the spontaneity of participants in their involvement, it relegates the heart of democracy, the debates, to a dull affair. Problems of democracy do not end there. We are quick to realize that our democratic institutions are not doing their job. Without second thoughts we proclaim, the below-par performance of our institutions is an honest reflection of the low quality of our representatives, the ones who constitute such institutions. That puts the ball in the people's court, the blame, of course, transferred to the ones who elected the representatives in the first place. People, it should be remembered, can only elect the best of the candidates, and therefore, we need to make whatever changes necessary to make people of caliber choose politics as a natural option. This part needs to be analysed further. Should we continue with the whip? Discontinuing it will, also, as an icing on the cake, put an end to party politics. Of course, another way to exist, to escape from whip. If we make necessary changes to the rules of governance to stipulate that a government, once elected, will serve its full term of office, unless A. resigns or B. gets defeated by an explicit motion of no confidence, the whip shall become largely unnecessary. That such an act will make the parliamentary discussions and debates livelier as well as scholarly, and also will be attracting, naturally, the cream of the intelligentsia, are only some of the immediate benefits. Chapter 48 Why do bad habits flourish? Let us begin with a few old sayings. Some of the most memorable ones are about the universal nature of bad habits. Even the most fickle are faithful to a few bad habits. If it weren't for my bad habits, I'd be an idle fellow. The unfortunate thing about this world is that good habits are so much easier to give up than bad ones. Bad habits are like a comfortable bed, easy to get into, but hard to get out of. I wanted to say further, why do we sport bad habits, though our response is one of discomfort, such as overspending, overeating, smoking, drinking, gambling, etc., which not only is harmful to our health and well-being but also is a heavy burden on our financial state, social standing and all the good things in life. One study says, the bad habit takes our mind away from our boring lives and relieves our stress. The habit takes over your mind and creates a reality that doesn't really exist, a brief utopia, where things are just the way we want them to be. In another study, innate human defiance, need for social acceptance, inability to truly understand the nature of risk, individualistic view of the world and the ability to rationalize unhealthy habits, as well as genetic predisposition to addiction, are shown as probable causes. But one thing I observed is that we never get fed up with our bad habits. Anything in life, however good it is, tends to lose its charm over a period of time. That is, the marginal satisfaction or marginal comfort obtainable from any entity is always on the decline. This, popularly known as the theory of diminishing marginal utility, is the rule governing basic human conduct that can explain in full the process of deriving and enhancing satisfaction. Why is it that some facets of human behavior are free from this, and why such a phenomenon occurs, that too, exclusively in the realm of bad habits? I think one can safely say that we resort to various actions or activities to satisfy each of our needs. A few among these happen to get termed as bad habits and a few others, the opposite. Such labeling should only be a temporal view, which is susceptible to change, and should have no influence on how habits behave. Shouldn't the pattern of deriving contentment be the same, whether we speak of good habits or the bad ones? Take our enjoyments. All of them come under the purview of this theory. We cannot continue with the same form of enjoyment for indefinite periods of time. Take the case of something of our choice, say, ice cream, the first cup of which provides us with 100 units of happiness. The next cup shall be able to provide only 80 units of happiness, next, even less, and so on till we get fed up of ice cream. The same is true for all matters of personal choice, mode of entertainment, habit, or routine. For example, if we're in the habit of drinking tea every morning, we ourselves shall find an excuse for a change once in a while. But this does not seem to apply to anything we are hooked onto. Whether it is some habits like smoking, a chain smoker, drinking, a habitual drinker, reading certain kind of books, an addicted reader, or anything we enjoy in its extremes, the state of being fed up does not occur. Why? That brings us to the fundamentals of habits. Everything good we do is for meeting some of our demand, be it physical needs of the body or intellectual needs of the mind, or both. Some of these may also be termed as spiritual needs, whereas what we consider as bad habits does not fall within the above discussion. If bad habit was intended to satisfy a need, the reduction in marginal utility as discussed above would have taken place, bringing it to a natural stop. But that doesn't happen. The very existence of elaborate and widespread arrangements for day addiction, which can be seen in all societies, is enough to prove this point. What then is a bad habit? What do bad habits do? Certainly, none of our needs is being satisfied by a bad habit. Bad habits, in fact, are only certain, mainly repetitive, activities that we continue to be busy with. Why should we be so attached to such activities, if these are not meeting any of our needs? Yes, that is needed to prevent something else from occupying us, is the only plausible answer. And as the chosen activity does not satisfy any of the human needs, no cap need necessarily occur to its effectiveness due to diminishing marginal utility and can continue to block those inconvenient thoughts from occupying our minds. As mentioned elsewhere, avoidance of such thoughts is of paramount importance in maintaining a comfortable state of existence, especially for the male. The widely observed peculiarity, a greater incidence of bad habits among the male of our species, is a silent proof of this. This can now be explained easily. They have more of these inconvenient thoughts to escape from.